to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood-Coleman, the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, the featured country is Japan, where elections were held on October 31st. Ahead of the election, Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, elected former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida as its new leader, setting him on course to be Japan's new Prime Minister, succeeding outgoing Prime Minister Yoshida Suga. Kishida's first order of business would be to lead the LDP into the general elections. He faced headwinds given the polling data showing him holding lower to marginal approval ratings. And another sign of danger for the LDP came in the form of by-elections to the upper chamber, the House of Councillors, held a week before the parliamentary elections. In those by-elections, the LDP lost one seat in the Shizuoka prefecture. It was to be seen if that result was an aberration or a harbinger of things to come for the LDP and its junior coalition partner, Komeito. On election day, October 31st, Japan time, voters went to the polls to cast their ballots. The ruling LDP and its junior coalition partner, Komeito, were faced with battles in several constituencies that promised to be competitive. Polling data suggested the LDP and Komeito would likely hold its majority and win at least 233 seats in the 465-member lower chamber, but the predictions were that it might not retain its strong majority it had going into the election, 276 seats, instead seeing a loss of fortune. But once the polls were closed, it was apparent that Prime Minister Kishida and the LDP had defied expectations and had in fact won a decisive victory. According to the exit polls, Prime Minister Kishida's LDP was on track to acquire more than 233 lower house seats on its own, certainly enough to command a clear parliamentary majority without a coalition partner. The estimate was that the LDP would in fact secure between 258 and 261 seats, and its junior coalition partner going into the election, Komeito, was on course to secure 32 seats. This result was a resounding ratification of Kishida's leadership, which offered him a mandate to move forward with his policy agenda. On that agenda, Prime Minister Kishida vows regarding economic growth under the aegis of what has been touted as a new capitalism. It's one that contrasts with the Abenomics approach that has arguably benefited corporations over people. Kishida would also have to continue to deal with the pandemic management as new waves of COVID-19 variants have continued to retain the virus as a public health threat across the world. As well, defense and deterrence against threats from hostile nations in the region. Moving to Sudan, on October 25th, Sudan's military forces had seized power in a coup d'etat. Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok had been placed under house arrest. Sudan's top military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, had declared a state of emergency during a televised national address and dissolved the Transitional Sovereign Council that had been established to move Sudan towards democracy following the overthrow of long-serving dictator Omar al-Bashir. Essentially, the small but significant strides Sudan had made towards democracy in the aftermath of the ousting of al-Bashir were now reversed. It was soon clear that the military junta, however, did not have the support of the people. General Burhan was reviled for betraying the trust of the Sudanese people, who were eager to see their nascent democracy in the post-Bashir era grow in a new direction. The celebratory mood of the military had given way to quiet demoralization, with the realization that there was just not enough popular backing for the coup. On October 30th, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese people took to the streets across the country to protest the military's takeover. It was the most significant register of popular discontent since the coup took place. Undeterred by the threat of violence, demonstrators chanted no for military rule, yes for civilian rule. Others used anti-military and anti-coup slogans and also chanted such messages on banners. Another key message of the protesters was that the demand that the coup leader, General Burhan, resign and that the civilian government be restored. The United States Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, warned against using violence against protesters. That warning fell on deaf ears as the death toll rose. According to the Central Committee of Sudan doctors, some people had been shot to death and hundreds more were wounded as the result of the military's use of live fire and tear gas to quell the protesters. The bottom line, even with the bloodshed, the coup that had ensued only a week earlier was unraveling. Moving to Iran, that country has indicated that it would return to the negotiations aimed at reviving the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, also known colloquially as the Iran nuclear deal. To recap, signatories to the 2015 JCPOA were Iran and the P5+1 countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, plus Germany. In 2015, it had been the Obama administration who had negotiated the agreement on behalf of the United States to place curbs on Iran's nuclear program and to ensure that Iran would not develop a nuclear weapon. The Trump administration that followed withdrew the United States from the agreement in 2018. According to Trump, the JCPOA would not prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, even though until that time Iran had complied with provisions of the accord. The United States' withdrawal from the JCPOA essentially defanged the power of the remaining signatories, destabilized the accord itself, and prompted Iran to take actions that breached the terms of the deal. In retaliation to Trump's actions, Iran violated the agreed-upon limit on uranium enrichment, resuming enrichment of uranium to 20%. While 20% is a far cry from the 90% purity required for weapons-grade uranium, the move was nonetheless a provocative one. Indirect talks were held in Vienna, Austria, between Iran and the United States starting from April 2021 through June 2021. The goal of the talks for the incoming Biden administration in the United States was to curtail Iran's nuclear program, bringing them back into compliance with the JCPOA in exchange for the lifting of United States sanctions. Progress on talks appeared optimistic initially, but things took quite a different turn after the election of ultra-conservative Ebrahim Raisi as the new Iranian president in June. At the time, it was unclear if any kind of work on the JCPOA would even be viable. Fast forward to October of 2021, and there were additional concerns when the director of the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog Agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, Rafael Grossi warned that the JCPOA was no longer intact. At issue was Iran's decision to deny camera access at a facility used to make centrifuge parts. But some optimism had also cleared on the diplomatic horizon in late October, following a meeting with the European Union's chief coordinator, Enrique Moro. Deputy Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri announced Iran's return to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the United States remained committed to pursuing a diplomatic path forward. Finally, I want to end with China's hypersonic weapons test. To recap, Dmitry Sevastopolo of the Financial Times reported that China had tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile in mid-2021. The sophistication of the hypersonic missile technology in conjunction with the advanced space capability has caused alarm and consternation for United States military intelligence. Typically, a hypersonic weapon would be launched using a conventional rocket booster. It would convey a detachable glide body that separates from the rocket. At that point, the hypersonic glide vehicle would no longer be able to accelerate, but would maintain guiding maneuverability with the aim of hitting the given target. Hypersonic weapons do not follow the fixed parabolic trajectory of a ballistic missile. The maneuverability aspect and the flight path unpredictability make hypersonic weapons both dangerous and hard to intercept with anti-missile defense systems. This is something about which the United States defense officials are sounding the alarm. Moreover, the potential for global strikes from space raised even more concerns. China has disputed Financial Times reporting and claimed that it simply carried out a spacecraft testing check. But the key news this week is that General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, officially confirmed the Chinese hypersonic weapons test. He emphasized two elements of concern: the fact that Beijing was clearly in pursuit of an Earth-orbiting system, and one designed to evade American missile defenses. By Earth orbiting, military experts refer to a Cold War concept known as fractional orbital bombardment. In the next week, I'll cover movement on President Joe Biden's bipartisan infrastructure package and the Build Back Better agenda. I will continue to cover relations related to former President Trump's attempt to overturn the election of 2020, as well as progress on the January 6 Select Committee's investigation. Other items I'll be covering include COP26, the climate summit in Glasgow. I'll also cover developments on the Iranian nuclear deal and the situation in Ethiopia, where rebels from Tigray are advancing on the capital. In addition, I will cover the security situation in Afghanistan. I'd like to take this time to mention my comprehensive Afghanistan withdrawal report called Sunset in the Graveyard of Empires, which will soon be available for purchase from the Country Watch website at www.countrywatch.com. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, and remember, now more than ever, we live in an interconnected world.